today in EVE Online, April 22, 2020. I'm Adderall. We're going to go through EVE Online with a couple topics in mind. We're going to hit the CSM15 rules that just came out. We'll also be talking about the MER as much as we can extrapolate this early on. It just came out today, a few minutes ago. With me is a whole gang. I'll try to introduce them as they talk. And you will probably recognize Arya, Caleb, Fonsui, Julius Doctor. And I'll try to introduce whoever else talks. Okay, let's get started. We are going to skip over the statistics today. Although there are battles happening around EVE Online. We haven't prepared to dig into them, and we have too much material today, so we're going to skip that today, and we're going to go right to CSM15, which would be, I think, the easier topic. All you need to know about CSM15. All right. Hi, what? Now you're quiet.
That the CSM thing, it's gone American. We now have term limits.
That's probably the biggest news here. Let me turn you back up, Caleb. Okay, there you're whole again.
It should be clarified that those term limits are not finite. It just a year break is mandated after 3 terms.
Which isn't that actually the same as in America? If you isn't there a cooldown? You can come back, right?
Negative.
Nope, you cannot. 2 terms for life in the United States.
Except if you're in the Senate. At which point you can stay there basically till you die.
Why do you think they term? Actually, let's let people know what's in here, and then we'll come back and talk about the changes. One of those is term limits. You feel like reading Fonsway? If not, I can. I don't think you're.
Yeah, no, I'm on my headset right now. I'm outside with it.
If you furbish the link, I can go ahead and read for everybody.
All right. Because here's a link.
I already had the MER up, so I'll restart this one.
Oh, good. So this is
excellent. So CSM15, all you need to know. Greetings, honorable citizens of New Eden. The 15th democratic elections for the Council of Stellar Management are upon us. This blog will go over the changes that are being introduced this year and will provide you with the necessary information about the election timeline. The timeline begins April 27th through the 11th of May with the submission period for candidates. The 28th of April to the 15th of May will cover application processing. And from the 18th of May onward, there will be a candidate announcement, campaign period, voting period, and the final reveal happening on the 12th of June. This timeline has worked well in the past, so there are no significant changes being introduced here this year. Going through the CSM transition during summer allows time for comprehensive onboarding to be conducted for each member, with people new to the program able to receive the extra attention they might need before it all gets turned up to 11 for the second half of 2020. What's changing? With this strive for excellence, the program continually evolves through the introduction of changes designed for the betterment of the CSM, their role, and the benefit they offer to EVE Online players and CCP. There is much excitement here in sharing with you the changes that are going to be implemented for CSM 15. The first of these changes is a term limit. Serving on CSM is not an easy task, and facing the realities of fast-paced game development for the universe we love can take its toll on even the most fearless pilots in New Eden. There's also an undeniable advantage to having fresh perspective on things that comes with new members joining the council. This desire is to create a system that incorporates the value of having new personas without penalizing those players who find fulfillment in serving on the CSM. For that reason, a 3-year term limit is being instituted, after which a person will have to go on a 1-year cooldown before being able to return to the CSM again. This rule will not be fully retroactive, but CSM 14 members will have 1 year counted towards their term limit, giving each person another 2 years of service before incurring a cooldown. This will provide candidates with the necessary break to fly spaceships at their leisure and rekindle their love that might have been stifled, with simultaneously ensuring that confirmation bias is not fallen into by welcoming new faces into the program. A campaign forum post to help voters get more information about candidates and challenge the applicants to think about their candidacy. The campaign forum post creation process will be formalized and considered an integral part of everyone's application. It's a nice change. In the past, there have been all sorts of different posts. Some gave a little insight into the type of candidate, and others focused mainly on the topic of specific changes or precise ideas players wanted to see implemented into the game. While reading your suggestions often creates discussion internally and is something to be enjoyed, being on the CSM requires the thinking about EVE Online in a much broader terms and rarely revolves around finally getting cat ears, kawaii, customization options pushed through. Instead, it is hoped that the focus will shift towards people's strengths and the experiences they can bring to the table while discussing what makes them attractive candidates. Therefore, when sending in your application, you will have to create a campaign thread in the CSM section of the EVE Online forums answering the following 4 questions. 1. What is your EVE Online story? 2. Your areas of expertise. In which areas of the game do you feel you are most knowledgeable? What qualifies you and sets you apart from other candidates? 3. Why are you applying for the CSM? And 4. What can players expect from you? You are free to add more information and manage your campaign thread as you see fit, but the above four questions are the bare minimum that is required from everyone. There's also a single 5-day summit per term. CSM members devote a lot of their time to the program, and it is recognized that dedicating 2 weeks on top of flying to Iceland and participating in highly intensive sessions, even if we love having them over, is a lot to ask. Therefore, the barrier of entry will be lowered a little bit, and the CSM will move to a single 5-day summit per term that is easier to plan around. By doing so, the CSM will be opened up to those individuals from the community that could not otherwise have considered running due to other important commitments. With one summit, it will be necessary to be extremely strategic when dealing with the time to ensure that everyone gets the most out of it. The efforts that are usually put into the second summit will then be spread throughout the term, making the frequent interactions between CCP and the CSM more meaningful. CSM rules, expectations, and COC updates. Several adjustments have been made to the Council of Stellar Management website to reflect the upcoming changes and to make sure that the rest of the information is clear and up to date. You are invited to read each of the sections carefully, paying close attention to the role, expectations, and the code of conduct that each member is expected to follow at all times. Now, with the most significant changes covered, here's a look at the revised application requirements and a guide on how to apply. Did you want me to read the requirements off?
Let's stop there and go back to the interesting parts, which are, thank you very much. Very well done. We're going to go to what's, first of all, let's go through the submission timeline so that people don't miss their windows. Anyone who's interested in running for CSM, first of all, from you guys, and this will be a hefty discussion too, who do you think should be running for CSM in your opinion? What kinds of people?
I'm running again this year, so that's kind of up there.
So someone like you, Jurius Doctor.
I ran last year. I'm going to run again this year,
Yeah.
Mostly because I really like the term limit introduction. I'm sad about it for only one member, just because it means that we potentially are going to see a year where Steve Ronikin is not on the CSM. But I'm sure the guy needs a break too because he's been there for 4 or 5 years. So there's that. But I think people who should be in the CSM, other than the current players who are presently there, are people who want to see the game grow and are happy to see change happen.
But everybody wants to see the game grow, and most people think that change is okay as long as it's not them.
I love the second part of that sentence. Well done.
Well, but it's not to put you on the spot specifically, because I think you're incredibly smart and know a lot about EVE Online. But what kinds of players, more archetypal? I'm glad you're running, by the way.
Thank you.
What do you guys think?
I think it would potentially be a mistake. I'm not sure that Jurius will like the whole sausage factory thing, and it would be horrible to actually lose him as a player.
Well, not for him specifically. What kinds of people should be running for CSM? There are people out there that are like, well, I kind of would like to have some say-so over the development of EVE Online, but I'm nobody. Or
so there's a couple of criteria that I look for in someone that I think is a valid. First and foremost, this has to be someone whose life is in order, someone who is stable and has everything good at home and can actually focus and has the time to pay attention to this and care appropriately and isn't going to let their personal issues bleed in. And there's a lot of people who do run that don't fit that. More specifically with regard to who would actually be suited once they have the job. Players who care about the state of the game, players who approach it with a game design mindset rather than my pet rock mindset. Anyone who has a platform of specific changes they want to see made, I'm already not in their camp. I don't want to hear, I want these 3 things done.
My
You can
pet
highlight
rock.
a couple of things. Yeah, you can highlight a couple of things, but please don't base your entire campaign on 1, 2, or 3, or even 4 or 5 things. It's more of a holistic view of the game.
I think it's okay to be a lobbyist in your specialty, right?
Sure.
But
No,
we
you
want the people that actually do the work. I think talking about which types of CSM members we would like is maybe more valid. I think people like Steve, even though he's of course not running, but people with the same mindset, people with the mindset similar to Jin Tan, is definitely a very, very good candidate. People like Brisk was really good for the CSM. And of course, someone like Exuki that actually brings something fresh and informative to CCP.
I can see why Exuki has a vote of confidence, and he's proven that. He just has unparalleled knowledge of certain aspects of the game. And he has, to me, what has seemed like, and if I'm wrong about this, he's very good at being deceptive, but I don't think I am. He has a very open way of approaching it, really kind of hurting his own team while saying, here's some of the problems, here's some of the misconceptions, and here's some of the black corners that you don't see, CCP, and here's how we combine mechanics to get around the certain things. And he just did an amazing job with his presentation that took everybody by surprise, including the CSM, and even some veteran CSM people were like, wow, that presentation.
Welcome to Billy, who just joined the channel, by the way.
Okay, Billy. Billy CSM, are you running again, Billy? Have you decided?
I'm gonna do one more.
You are? All right. So Exuki's running again. You're running again. I presume Gobbins is running again. Everybody else, I don't know. Are they running again? Do you know?
If I know, it's not my purview to say for them, unfortunately.
Okay. I'll tell you, just about all of them are not running again.
Do we know if Aerith is running again?
I do not think he is running again. I do not think Anominate is running again. Merkel Chen, I do not know if he's running again.
So this is going to be a big year for change, and that's interesting. Going back to what something Fonsway said, though, specific to openness, intelligence, having a stability, another thing that I think that any candidate coming into the CSM needs to have, and again, this is as somebody who's from the outside looking in, I've never been on CSM before, but I have interacted with a lot, is that the moment you're CSM, people want to ask you questions and throw ideas your way. And you have to be willing to be able to engage with the player base because that's your role. Like you're sort of the intermediary. And when you come before CCP and they use you as a focus group and they bring ideas to you, you're there to provide objective, open feedback and point out the black holes and things that might cause problems, or provide them with insight as to how the player base may respond based on your experiences. To keep that live and fresh, you need to be communicating with the player base. And if you're somebody who shuts down communication externally and you stop communicating with anybody but you and yours the moment you become a CSM member, you're of no use to the rest of the player base.
All right.
Yeah. From all my discussions with CSM members that I've had, so I've had quite a few. Obviously, not everybody is willing to talk about this, but you end up as essentially an honorary game designer in the position of a team lead. And if someone attempts to do this job on their own, and they just say, well, these are my opinions, these are my thoughts, and I'm just going to do it, that is going to be less impactful than someone who actually builds a team and has people who do research for him and with him and presents good business cases for changes that they want made and approaches this as a game designer as opposed to a player. It's a game designer with the player perspective and a game designer at the head of a team that actually puts the effort in and treats this as a responsibility rather than a privilege.
All right. I was looking for more archetypes, guys, instead of but I mean, fascinating, Fonsway, how you're thinking that a person has to have their life in order before they can be CSM.
A really good archetype or something that would help. It's like one of those things when you're looking at a resume, these are the things we require and these are the things that would be huge assets. I think a huge asset is somebody who's ever had to sit through a committee meeting before and who knows the decorum that goes with behaving yourself in a meeting.
Yeah, for sure. And to address the archetype comment, I think that approaching it from the perspective of a player archetype is kind of invalid, Like, players of all walks are capable of being capable game designers if they are able to remove themselves from the equation. The more we double down on the player archetype, I do this content, I do that content, I engage in this, I engage in that, the more we focus on that, the less effective we are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, that knowledge has to be there, but that can't be the primary attribute of a person.
I don't know. I think most players make bad game designers universally.
You're
Yeah,
right.
unless
Most
they
players
work
would make bad CSM members.
Actually, it's funny. I think that that's the consensus at CCP as well. But okay, more on that in a minute. Let's go back to, so we're trying to decide like what kinds of people should be running. If you feel like you should be running for CSM, but you think that you don't have a chance, I'm not going to encourage you, but don't count yourself out. I'm not sure how you can find your confidence to run, but I wouldn't count yourself out initially. Well, let's stop with that.
Good.
We're going to stop with that. We're going to go with timeline now. Timeline, just so that if you are thinking of running, 1 second. If you are thinking of running, here are the timelines that you need. Arya, you can talk now.
There's a couple differences in this. So there's additional requirements, and the first one, just to highlight that before we go into timelines. When you look at CSM15 compared to 14, you must create a campaign thread in the CSM section of the EVA Online forums covering the questions listed in the article. And that's something new that we didn't see in previous.
Sorry, I thought you always had a
timeline for that is April 27th to May 11th. You'll have until May 11th to fill out your application form.
Before it was encouraged, and they had a Cedar post to say, here's some questions you can answer. Now they've made it a requirement. If you don't fill that out, they won't consider your application.
That's such a great step, because we're not going to get, I was on CSM and I'm going to run again. Like, we're not going to get that anymore. That was disrespectful to the community, and that was like the norm.
Well, it just wasn't necessary to win. And now it's necessary to qualify.
Yeah, it was disdainful towards the community and towards CCP to make that your platform.
Well, it was not necessary. Someone like who has a voter block, like maybe Vili here, maybe Aerith, maybe Merkel Chen, maybe Gobbins, they have a voter block that doesn't need to be convinced, so they didn't need to do all that paperwork. But anybody who wanted to be looked at and possibly considered by strangers would have to fill all that out. So now it's a requirement. You have to fill all that out too. And you may get some really, lack of trying answers to those questions, but it is now part of the requirements that you have to fill out certain sections. We'll get to those in just a minute. But let's look at this timeline here. The submission period begins April 27th. That is really a week away or less. We're at the 22nd.
Yeah.
And so in a week, application period will open and it will close on May 11th. I think that's about 2 weeks, right? It's a 2-week period. And that starts again in less than a week. Then on the 28th through the 15th, that's the application process.
A couple notes on the application. As you're going through it, they make a note, beware session timeouts, and that your applications cannot be edited after you submit them. So you don't want to log into the site, start typing and thinking about what you want to type. You want to have this composed ahead of time, edited, and make sure it's what you want in the application before you go and actually submit it. So you're going to have to submit your documents and pictures as well. That's the same. There's a new bullet point here that was not in last year, though. All applicants will receive an email from the community team confirming the submission went through and the documents have been received successfully within a few days. And this helps the issue that we had, I think, last year, where one of the possible candidates thought that they applied, but they were missing something, but they didn't know. They didn't get an email back. And I think we had one person who thought they were a candidate, ended up not being a candidate. So this is now spelled out that you should receive an email within a few days to say you're good, your submission went through. And if you have not received that, your submission did not go through.
Well, last year there was actually a bug on the on the site, right, where if you submitted an application in a certain way or you didn't fill out some box or something, the application would go in as like it had been, successfully sent, but it would not actually be sent.
Yeah,
So
that's
here's
a
another
real,
bullet that I think is new.
Wait. We're getting ahead of ourselves. I just wanted to go through the timeline, guys, just real quick to give people a conceptual idea of how much time they have to decide if they're thinking of doing it or how much time they have to wait if they're waiting to hear interviews from these people. So in a week, you're going to have a 2-week period that opens up, and you're going to be able to submit. Paralleling that week is an application process. So you can actually submit. I don't understand the application process. Is that when they're considering who's...
yeah, it means
okay.
that your response may lag up to 4 days after the end of the submission period.
Got it. Before they okay you. So
Yes.
then on May 18th, this is when everybody finds out who the official candidates are. So that's May 18th. That's when the campaigning begins. And that goes on for, looks like a period of
11 days.
11 days. This is 2 weeks plus weekends or minus weekends. 11 days. That's all you have to campaign. That's a lot of interviews to do in 11 days because usually there's about 30 to 50 applicants. One time there was 70 applicants. And then voting begins June 1st, which is easy to remember. So June 1st, and you have 7 days to vote. And then announcements are made, on June 12th. So that's the timeline. It's kind of condensed. Now let's go into some of the stuff that you need to know to prepare. We'll go back down to your campaign forum post. We already...
It's funny that they say the campaign period ends on the 29th, but the voting doesn't begin until the 1st. It's not like they're going to stop people from campaigning for 2 more days.
No.
What? Let me tell you.
I mean, on Reddit alone, you'll see posts all through that period, and probably
Yeah,
into
people
the
are
first
going to
couple
be...
days of voting.
Yeah, they're going to be out there, shouting their cause, etc., or growing
see what you're
support.
saying.
But I don't know why they
And
had to
driving
say
people
that
to
it ends on
vote
29th.
too. Like, so all through
Yeah.
the voting period, you can expect people to be going like, "Get out there, give me your character."
So really, the campaigning is going to go from the 18th to the 8th, the end of
Yeah,
voting
to the
period.
very end,
Yeah.
to the last bit.
All right.
Yeah, these timelines are condensed, though, and it's important.
Yeah.
Don't wait until the 11th to submit. CSB should respond within a few days, but with 18th being the announcement, you want to get your submission in early because should there be a problem and you need to resubmit, you need to buffer in those couple days. So I would say if you're looking to be a candidate for CSM, get your application squared away early.
All right.
Especially if we have a big CSM, like was it the CSM 11 had like 50 candidates or something? So
And Aria made a really good point about the application process itself, the web part. This is not an afterthought. You don't apply on the website. You put your stuff together. Every step of this process indicates forethought and planning and care. And by the time you get to the website, that's just the paperwork. You're just submitting stuff that you already wrote.
I think for people who've never run before, it's worthwhile to talk about the requirements from a personal information level. You are required to send them pictures of your passport, both the identification pages and the serial numbers. You're required to give them your real life photo and to consent to having your actual country of residence listed on the website. And a new one, I think this is actually a new bolt this year, is if you're running as an alt and you control a character that has a reputation in the EVE universe, CCP may require you to run under that identity instead.
That's an old rule.
Is that an old rule? Okay, I wanted to be sure.
The only rule that was different was the post is required now.
But the point is that CCP doesn't want you to run a stealth campaign. They want to know who you are and who most people know you as. So there's no trickery, or I don't know why you would do that anyway, but could be some games that are played with that. The other thing is this. It's very interesting because we've hit this era where we're quarantined and a lot of function of government and the population is shut down, that you need a passport to apply, and passports are not being renewed at this time. So if you do not have a passport that can last to the end of the year, in other words, doesn't expire till the end of the year, you might be in some trouble here.
Or you're sitting on an expired passport you haven't renewed yet.
Yeah, which actually I am. Mine expired this month, and they're not renewing them. At least that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I think my passport's good till like 2027, so I should be fine.
But that's
So
an
you
interesting.
heard it here. Matterall is not running for
Yeah,
CSM.
I am disqualified.
I love that. That's what you took from that.
I'm disqualified. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Maybe they take the old passport until the new one comes in or something. I don't know. I would
It's also
not.
kind of interesting that this election hits with a high point in PCU, right?
Yes. You mean that there's a lot of people logging into the game and it's a good time?
But it means that there's a lot more eyeballs on the election. So some elections have hit when it was kind of in a slump, when there was not that many people around, right? Because it was usually timed just around when we were about to go to FanFest.
Right.
On the password issue, just to clarify, if your password is expired, do not think, oh, I can't apply. CCP has put language in here saying they need to affirm your real life identity for the contract purposes of the NDA. So an expired passport may still be valid for them to do that background check. So if your passport is expired and you really wanted to run for CSM, I would say go through the process anyways. The worst that can happen is they say no.
Yeah. Okay, so
Well, it says if you do not currently have a valid passport, we will accept a picture/scan of a valid and approved passport application, accompanied by a picture of your driver's license.
okay, I didn't know it was for identity validation. I always thought it was to make sure you can make it to Iceland if you win.
Well, they have other language in there that says if someone can't make it, then they will attend by video conference.
Okay. So
And I
it's,
believe Brisk said he attended a lot of his meetings that way.
yeah. Ron's in the audience saying, this
Speaking of
just
which,
did.
I mentioned his name. I must have said it 3 times because Brisk is here.
Uh-oh.
Of course
What
he's
did I
here.
miss?
It's CSM season. This place is freaking.
Exactly.
This place is full.
Risk for CSM15?
I was laughing because Dirk gave me a hard time because I went on the Trash Talk Tuesday show last night. He's like, you're a traitor going on these shows. I'm like, dude, it's election season. I'm a whore to anyone that'll take me.
You're seeing someone else. Yeah. No, it's and this I didn't mean that specifically for you, Brisk, but of course you are because you're running for CSM. And when CSM season comes around, we get that's high tide for talk shows.
Very popular.
Yeah, people need exposure, so they get it where they can get it, and that's usually these talk shows. Okay, although I don't think you will need help because you're in the initiative. You are part of the meta show, and you have incumbents in Goonswarm appearing not to want to run again. At least that's the indication.
As the old saying goes, unless you're running unopposed, you're running scared. So I am running scared.
I see.
I've never heard that, but it's a great saying.
Sorry, I dropped something. That's why I had to. All right. So what else is in here that's interesting? Term limits, right? Why do you think they put in term limits?
I think, at least from my perspective, this is something that everybody has been clamoring for. Honestly, the way that they implemented them, 3 years in a row, and then a year break, and then you can do another 3 years, that's not really term limits. It takes a very rare person to want to do this more than 3 years in a row. Steve and Eric are probably the only ones that I know that would be willing to do, have been willing to do that. Everybody else, after a while, you just don't want to do it anymore. So I think this is still business as usual.
Well,
But
there's
Willie,
also
what do
the
you think?
Well, Brisk, you and I discussed this a couple of days ago or last week, and you said that it might be appropriate for someone to be on the CSM for 2 terms, make their relationships, establish their dialogues, and then clear up the space for someone else to establish those dialogues. Because once you've done that, you
Absolutely.
can step out and still be effective as a member of the community without having that position.
I mean, that's absolutely true. Somebody like Steve, even if he's not on the CSM, he's still going to be a go-to guy for third-party developers and stuff like that. If they need somebody's insight, they know where to reach him. He's not hard to find. The same with Eric. The same with a lot of the long-term members of the community, and they reach out to a ton of people, not just folks that are on. I still talk to devs all the time. I haven't been on the CSM in years, so.
There are programmer members of the community I would love to see come in after Steve. Like Crowcroach is very active in the forums and in the Slacks, and he's just as active as a developer as Steve, but we never hear his voice, even though he's one of the core guys that's in that community.
That's one of the downsides to the running thing, is that, you know, it's not enough to just be known inside that community. You have to have name ID in a larger community, and that's what I think is a stumbling block for a lot of people that are trying to make their name and breakthrough. I mean, if I hadn't done a commercial, nobody would have any idea who the hell I am. I'm just a line member, you know. So that's always the downside.
I think much the same with Omeka too. When he did his video, it really raised his recognition a lot in terms of the timing he needed.
Yep, absolutely.
I think both Brisk and Omeka, though, delivered, though, when they were under pressure. So you do a great video, but you got to deliver under pressure when people then take a look at you. You got to be able to deliver, I think. So it's a bit more than just a video, but it is the way of breaking, you know, opening that door for yourself, and then you have to be able to walk through it with the confidence of players to some degree. Okay.
Agreed.
Well, what was it? But why do you think they did a term limit? Why would they force you to sit out? Is that a anti-Steve rule?
I don't think it's an anti-Steve or an anti-Aerith rule. I think, honestly, one of the things that I've noticed about Dopamine is I think he is very, very focused on player feedback on the EVE-0 forums. I think he pays a lot of attention to that. And the three things that you will constantly hear from people when you talk about the CSM on the EVE Online forums is, one, can we have a vote to not have a CSM? Which happen. I mean, invariably somebody will bring that up every single time there's a talk about CSM elections. Number two, why don't we have slots for one high sec person and one low sec person and one faction warfare person? Why don't we do that? And three, term limits. And I feel like they couldn't deliver on the second one because there's no easy way to do that. So term limits was an easy thing that they can throw out to the community that a lot of the folks that are skeptical of the CSM have been asking for, but do it in such a way that it's not going to have a huge impact on the people that are on there now. And I mean, in the end, other than a handful of people, not that many people serve more than 3 years. You know, I can't, off the top of my head, I can think of three.
It doesn't. I think it just it doesn't make sense to me on how that. Well, it doesn't matter because most people don't even serve past 3, like most don't, and the ones that do, Steve and arguably Aerith, are pretty good CSM members. So just, you know, or Mike Azariah, for instance, if he had served multiple times. I don't know. I don't understand what they're trying to do here. If they're trying to
I'll certainly say something.
Yeah.
There's definitely no desire to get rid of Steve. Like, I think he's like one of the most beloved of all CSMs, and especially from what the interactions I've seen at CCP. You know, there's kind of this like beloved fondness of him. So I can assure you they're not trying to get rid of him, and I don't think it's Aerith either. So.
Yeah, and I was teasing that it's an anti-Steve rule. That's why I put it out there. I was being ironic.
I know you were teasing, but I didn't want anyone to like ever get the impression like Steve's one of those guys where everybody just like, you know, like he's been around so long he becomes part of the background, but like he's just that like loving guy. You're like, this dude's awesome.
Right.
He's very positive.
Steve announced that he was not running again several months ago. I think he was one of the first CSM members to say he's not running again.
Yeah, he could have run another 2 years because this doesn't start until this last year. So Billy's got 1 year under his belt. He's got 2 more to run if he wants them. So Steve would have had 2 more if he wanted to, even though he's had like 5. 5 terms, yeah. 6.
My intent was always to only do 2. However, the whole like singular summit thing may change that. I don't know, but yeah, it's like people always assume it's like, oh, you get this nice free trip to Iceland. It's like, yeah, I don't know, like
it's a work trip.
If it was a free trip to Hawaii, then maybe more people would want to do it, but it's still Iceland.
It's like you go to Iceland, but all you're doing is what I do every other normal day, which is sit in a fucking boardroom and, you know, have shitty chats. It's like, this is not exactly some free, you know, and basically you're giving up your vacation to do that. So it's not.
Yeah.
This is why I say it's beneficial to be somebody who's used to death by meetings, is that you won't get exhausted by that.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think part of the reason why this CSM has had so much success is because it was so built on professionals who were all kind of understanding what was going on.
They knew how to
I think
behave
it
in a
was
meeting.
weird that there was no anti-zombie farmer rule.
What? Say that again.
I think it's weird that there's no anti-zombie farming rule in there. That I expected them to plug that hole.
Zombie farming.
Oh,
Skill farming.
skill farming. NPCs or characters that are for sale. You buy them off the market. So any of you can sell your character and all the experience that goes with them, and somebody can buy that character. And if they don't like the configuration of those skills, they can extract all the skill points, and that's called a zombie. And so it's basically skill farming.
You don't necessarily sell any of the characters in the zombie farm. It's just to generate skill points. The problem is that they're all eligible to vote. That means that anyone that's got 250 accounts or 500 accounts will basically have that many votes.
Except that they do have that rule, and it's the one that says if you have a more notable, or really any alt that has an established reputation, they can force you to run as that character. So it doesn't matter if you've got 200 accounts.
That's
if
to
you're
run.
if you're main,
I'm talking about super voters. I think it's a problem that we allow these super voters to exist because you can basically sell your votes.
They're like super
Talking
spreaders.
about guys like me who was going to dump 2,500 votes on myself, but wasn't allowed.
Oh, wow. You have 2,500 accounts?
Yes.
Crazy.
Cable, talk to Villa and me after the show, please.
Yeah, can I talk to you later?
Yeah.
Can I get your number 3? I want your number 3.
You're going to be a kingmaker, but I'm going to work to get you nerfed.
There's no selling of supers and titans out of the Imperium. That's by rule. I don't care how many votes it costs.
There you go.
I'm gonna work to get you nerfed though, Cable, because this is player representation, not account representation. So why should you have the power of 1,500 people?
I totally agree.
Because it's not been removed. It's not.
That's
it's
my
still
whole
an
point.
option, and there's quite a lot of people that do skill point farming, and they have a ton of votes, and they really matter. You can basically make a huge difference. In the groups that I was hanging around in, I could basically just get shoehorned in from my personal relationship.
Isn't it funny though? They're like plantation owners, and the politicians from the city have to kind of come out to them and say, "Hey, can I get your support?" Isn't there a funny dynamic in that way? All right, so the romantic in me. I do think
it depends.
If this is player representation, it doesn't depend. It's not about who pays the most money. It is, if this is about player representation, players need to vote in a fair way. And we're not talking electoral system here where California votes don't count, but Illinois does count 10 times. We're talking
Unless,
about...
of course, you add the fact that if Cable wanted to vote with his 1,500 accounts, he might actually be automating that process, and that is by definition bannable.
Yeah, I mean that's the other part.
That is not the case because it has
well,
something to do with the actual game.
But the part of it is that honestly, it's hard enough to vote multiple accounts as it is. Can you imagine Cable sitting there and voting?
It's not hard at all.
2,500 times.
No, it's not hard.
It's a pain in the ass.
No, it's not.
Brisky,
totally a pain
you can straight up automate that process because you can just generate a link that goes to I want to vote for
He's
XYZ,
still got to
and then
click
just
the button 2,500 times.
There are people who do
and log in each of those accounts 2,500 times.
There are people who do PI in this game.
There are scripts that literally run the entire thing for you. You set it up, give it a password, what's it called, save or whatever it's called, and it'll literally run the entire thing down through you, and it'll take like 10 minutes.
Oh, a password fill in.
No, it's like it's a password manager. Sorry, that's what it's called.
You can't automate though. You cannot automate, but what you can do is copy and paste and hit enter. Copy and paste, hit enter. And there are people who do PI in this game, so you could do 1,500 of those, I believe.
As
can
somebody
automate
who works
it.
in IT, I can tell you that Cable is absolutely correct. In fact, I can point to an old forum post from Cribbo. Where he actually.
I know you can automate it. You're not allowed to automate it, is what I'm saying.
Yes, you are, because it's not in the game. I have specifically asked devs about this
So
because it has nothing to do with the act. It's not in the game. You know, the EULA only specifies that you're not allowed to do it in the game. Like for instance, you're allowed to input broadcast, log in, but we're not actually logging into the game, are we? We're logging into a website.
See, this is why
essentially
I believe
you're doing
that we should
automation in your web browser. And
yeah, exactly. And that's
automation in your web browser is not the same as automation in the game. That's how you get around
All right.
EULA.
So yes,
this is where we should have
possible.
the voting stations.
How
in
likely
the game.
is it?
Yes. I'm with
Like,
Caleb.
You'll get a very small number of people that'll do it. Like Steve could do it very easily. He could write that script in his sleep. But how many people will have an advantage of that, and how many people need to worry about that because they have that many accounts? I mean, Cable here is a wonderful exception. You're obviously somebody who's done this profitably enough that you can maintain that number of accounts, or you're simply a whale account. But
not at all.
You're a very, very small percentage of the population of EVE.
Yeah,
totally.
But it goes back to what skews the game, right? The people always complain about the null-centric representation of the CSM. If we have these alt accounts and these added votes per player, then there is a lot more votes for the null-centric player base because they, by definition, have more alts, right? So we're just exacerbating the whole problem by not figuring out how to limit this to one living, warm player.
Well, Cable, to Caleb's point, I agree with what he's saying. I think, however, at the same time, I don't have a problem with one person, one vote. If they want to go that route, that's fine with me. It doesn't bother me. I don't think it's going to make a big difference because any election system, including the one that we currently have, any one that we would move to that would be one person, one vote, is still going to favor organization over everything else. So the candidates who are able to herd their squirrels and get their folks to show up and vote, they're going to be the ones that win. And I think you're still going to have an edge from the big nullsec blocks because those are organizations that already exist. They're already designed to do cooperative type behavior like voting, and they're going to be the ones that go out and do it. I don't think it's going to make a huge impact on the type of representation.
This may actually take out the legs out from the underdogs that are not nullsec people. I mean, if you look at Cable and you look at Omeka, although I'm not vouching for their gameplay, they are not nullsec. They feed on nullsec, if anything, and they have an they have an unparalleled advantage, and they have so many accounts for the things that they do that this makes them players in this. Omeka got on, I think, even before Vili here, and Vili has an entire coalition behind him. So if you say one person, one vote, who are you actually hurting? And does it matter?
You're hurting the big organizations more than you're hurting anyone else. Of course, Brisk has a point with the whole organizational stuff, but the fact that the average amount of accounts in those groups is at least twice what everyone else is using, that alone pads their voting power. And the fact that most SP farming characters or players will also be very old school. They will be very elite players. So you are padding the whole game for very elite centric player base votes. And then I think we should go to a one player, one vote.
Yeah,
I
agree
one way
with you.
or another. I don't know exactly how, but I suggested that you have to actually be subbed and not actually plexed. But again, that's just because I'm biased towards making sure that CCP gets the player base representation that is most valuable to their wallets.
You have to go back to... Go ahead, Cable, and I'll go.
All right. I mean, you could just make it email and IP based. I mean, sure, some people can get around by using VPNs and so on, but there are only so many connections you can make with a VPN. So, like, there are still hard limitations if you can just combine email and IP or hardware recognition. Yeah.
CCP can figure out how to take on bots. They can figure out how to make an election that appears to be fair. And so what is the purpose of the election? It's player representation. And you can see it here in this, I'll put the link in, the Council of Stellar Management implementation of a deliberative, democratically elected council in EVE Online. And what they talk about is very interesting. It's very, very theoretical, that if you had a virtual player base and you had one group of laws, the EULA, that sits between them and the creators of the game, that at some point it would be necessary to create a deliberative, democratically elected body to communicate with the gods. It's almost like your priests that communicate with the gods on behalf of the amount of rain that you're going to get, the amount of sunshine, and the amount of crops that are going to grow. That's what the CSM is supposed to be.
And personally, I like the idea of adding a law aspect and putting the actual voting inside the client. I think it should be voting stations inside the game.
Totally agree. You need to get into the game, into the client, and you need to vote. And maybe you don't vote in all places. Maybe you actually have to fly home to Galente space where you were born to vote. Like there's more majesty to it, more in-game trappings for it. If you're talking about people existing in a virtual world, there's a lot more ground to cover than, hey, if you pay us for an account, we're going to check that box for you. You can vote. And if you pay us for 1,000 accounts, you can vote 1,000 times. To me, that's like mind-blowingly disproportionate. CCP wants participation. They got to put up a fair process. They got to put up a process that has the right purpose. It's and now you've seen, in my opinion, since CSM 11 or CSM 6, I think, it's the 2011 CSM 6 or so, a real interest for the empires to put their officials into the CSM. I'm talking about NullSec being interested in a bigger way, in an organized way, into
I think
CSM.
also Brisk would respect the fact that if they did something like in client and maybe made it one weekend only, you would have elections that mirror real life a lot more in how you report on it and how you maybe get the information and you don't get this gamed model that we have now.
So you would vote at the Eve Gate, maybe?
Well, I don't know
The
if you
home
can.
system thing or just select NPC stations, I don't know. It's just having the requirement to log into the game at a specific say weekend, maybe 3 days, and if you missed it, your vote is not counted. Just like couch voters in real life. If you don't vote, you don't have a say, and you have to do it on the actual day. I think it would just change the whole thing.
That being said, almost everywhere we do elections, we're moving away from that model. I think, honestly, I mean, guys, look, I told Dopamine, I said on the forums today, I really should do if I get elected, my CSM presentation next year on election systems and how we could set something up for CSM. But honestly, the more that I look at this, for what the CSM is, for the resources that CCP has to administer the system, and for the current level of participation that we are seeing in it, I don't see any system that is much better than what we currently have. As much as the STV is such a pain in the ass to figure out how it works, it's a really good system. I'll be right back. I got to take a work call.
I think it's actually leveraged. Every player counts, and what happens is the more players you amass, the more players have influence, and that's why you get 3 candidates from a big group like a Goon Swarm Imperium group, and you get 2 candidates from other groups that are almost the same size. It's not like you got your 1 candidate in, and then the people who voted for, and then the 1 candidate absorbed 20,000 votes, and then your second candidate didn't, because they all wanted to make sure the first guy got in. So I think it's supposed to be a system where everybody's vote gets to count, and you're supposed to vote your favorite first, your second favorite second, and your third favorite third, all the way down to 10. And in some way, it's going to trickle down like a little pinball until it figures out where your vote can actually be applied. I think that's a really simple way of putting it. But what that means, where it was supposed to be like your vote is not wasted, it feels like it gave even more leverage to groups that could organize a ballot. And that's why you have these ballots everywhere. They're very organized. And now they're global. They're trading those ballot positions. In other words, Vili will be number 1 on test, but he'll give number 2 over to who? I don't know. Let's just say Fraternity, just as a joke, right? So Fraternity gets their number 2 spot on the legacy ballot. They don't even like each other in game, but that might be the way it goes. And Fraternity does the same favor by putting Vili as number 2 on theirs. And now it's a global system of nullsec, and that's why you get 7 out of 8 seats going that way.
But that's also an advantage, right? Because one of the things that I've seen is that in-game affiliations might not necessarily matter when it comes to who goes on what types of ballots, because it's really, well, it's especially my experience with what I saw the Goon ballot did, right? They put people on there that are actually potentially their enemies just because they know that these people are good CSM members. I think that's really valid and honorable to have this thing where we game the system to the game's benefit. I think that's perfectly fine.
Well, I don't know. If everybody's white and they're like, that'll make a good person, then you have a minority problem, right? That's them saying this is who will work well with us doesn't give me any confidence if I don't agree with the people who are saying that. Can they were not going on, can they sit in a room? I think they are going on, can they sit in a room? Can we bargain with them? Are they reasonable? Can we reach consensus and then approach CCP with that consensus? If you listen to the questions last year that I was asked, a lot of Jintan actually was asking, like, the way the model has worked before is that the CSM have a meeting and get together and say, what are your top 3 priorities? And they vote so that they come into CCP in an organized fashion so they're not flying all over the place. And I was like, I'm willing to work in groups. It's what I do professionally, and it's look what I've done with TIS. But I'm not willing to adopt an agenda that the consensus want. Like, that's not. I don't even think that's good representation, because you get a lot of the same kind of thinking, the same kind of realities, the same kind of obviously that's the way it is thinking. And I think that's what's led to a myopic view of EVE Online as a game of PvP, combat, balance passes, and no imagination. I'm not saying CCP doesn't have any imagination, but there's no priority on it, it feels like. And if you think lore is imagination, think again, that's just lore. All right, did I just kill the conversation with that diatribe?
No, it's just
you can disagree with me.
You're pointing towards a rabbit hole, and I'm not sure I want to go into that one.
And another thing I think comes from that is I don't think that you should be campaigning to everybody who can and would support you, and wherever possible, you should be going for as high on their ballot as you can get. Last year's run, was my first time really running in earnest, and I didn't do too bad. I didn't make the first round because I didn't have enough to meet the 3,000 vote threshold, but I didn't do badly. I mean, I think I got about 2,600 votes.
Yeah,
and
you paid for a Facebook ad though, right? So you got a lot of Facebook. You did campaign.
I reached like 500,000 people on that. I looked back at the metrics the other day through Facebook. So I mean,
fantastic.
Most of the people I reached were in South America, like 350,000 of them. But I mean, there's really cheap ways. I think I paid $25 for that ad.
Yeah.
Like you can get really good reach in the community, and you can target specific communities in Facebook and Twitter. And this year I've picked up Twitch streaming and other things as well. But I can't count on those votes. Like, yeah, I can look at the number of visits that like my YouTube channel gets, and you could look at the visitation on Twitch and YouTube for TIS, but you can't count on every single one of those subscribers or followers to turn into a vote. And right. I think if you go counting your chickens before they've hatched, you're going to end up in a problem where you're probably not going to have done the legwork and done the extra lifting to make sure you get across that threshold for getting in through STV. Basically, never stop campaigning. Just keep pushing for those votes. Keep pushing for those numbers. Bring a campaign platform people can get behind.
I hate to disagree with you. I think it's a recipe for second place. Not that you're a second place guy, but that in the current system, there's a reality to the voting block power that is no longer just an alliance looking out for itself. It's now global among nullsec themselves. I think that was demonstrated last time.
Brisk actually wrote a post about this the other day. I realize he's on a work call right now, but one of the things he said was that, it worked out that because of how the single transferable vote system worked, it was his INN post. he didn't get any of the rest of the votes from his block. Like nothing passed down to him from Merkelchen. So it was really all the legwork he did trying to appeal to people in wormholes and low sec that carried him across that threshold and got him in as a candidate. So yes, it counts. Everything counts towards what you can get, but I don't think you should ever just sit on one source as being the thing that'll get you through, unless you're like, you're on the goon ticket and 45,000 people will vote for.
Well, I'm with Caleb here. Let's forget the mechanics of actually getting on CSM and let's talk about just its philosophical place in EVE Online, right? We have war, we need politics, and we have diplomacy too, but we need that politics. And this is really the only politics we have. And it's too bad that we don't have like election day and we don't have, fireworks outside of stations where the entire empire part of the game has a real impression that something's going on here. We should have billboards with people's identities made by CCP, not the players. Don't leave it up to the players, but they should have some screen time there inside the game and give it some majesty and some trappings of an event inside the game. Instead, it feels very divorced.
I think there's a problem with candidates. Okay, I'm a huge fan of at least a handful of the null candidates because they are just so good.
Better be a fan of mine.
Well, I am, and I just think that there are some null candidates that definitely deserve to be on the CSM. There are others that kind of, I don't know if you can call it turtle up, but they don't really care about being available and being a professional politician, quote unquote. This is maybe because they don't need to, and I think that's a little bit of a problem. It's of course might not be fair to shoot at the Imperium guys, but
no,
I think there's a problem in the fact that they don't need to care about the rest of the voter base when it comes to interaction. I think that's a little bit of a problem. It's nice that we have representatives like Brisk that is actually a very null-centric candidate, but is extremely professional and very available to everything outside of the null areas. I think that's really good. It's the same with Vili. And I just think that that's the type of CSM member that we need. The ones that kind of shut up and turtle up and don't want to engage with the rest of the community, I think they're a little bit of a problem.
Well, that's the NC dot candidates, right? I mean, let's look at the last 3 years of people that have been endorsed by my good friend Lady Scarlet. Of course, she's not the one that picks them, but she's the one that organizes the vote based on the direction probably of Vince. But we had Vince who didn't show up. I may have had some personal issues going on. That was a waste of seat. Filled in by, I think Killa B. He dropped out.
Sort. Well,
Sort filled in. But basically, the next year they put up Killa B, and he showed up 1 year, and then he didn't show up the second year. And I like him personally. It's not a personal thing, but not a good showing when your guys get elected and then totally waste the votes of their people and people they even bargained with. And you also had, even before that, you had Pfeiffer, and I don't remember if Pfeiffer made it through the election cycle. So it's not a good track record for people who are like, well, we got to get our guy in there and have no real interest in doing the extra work that's required for CSM. So it's not an issue of goons having bad candidates. Their candidates show up. Their candidates go. It's more like, what's NC's excuse for putting up candidates that don't show up?
I think it's more the fact that I would like these really good candidates that engage with the player base very actively. The Steve Renukins, the Jin Chans, the Brisk Groupoil, really, hell, even Sword Dragon. There's just Exuki, right? These guys that really make it a calling, right? I would like to see a CSM consisting only of that type of professionalism. That would be amazing. And preferably a few niche guys as well. That would really be nice.
Well, anyway, I'm with you. I would love to see an election day. I would love to see election poll places. You need to be in the game to vote. I'd like to see, fireworks outside of stations that make it known that something's going on. And, you bring the participation from the players that are in there, not just the players that listen to these shows. Frankly, I think we're way overrepresented.
I just think it's funny that you of all people are in favor of the in-person voting, given our real life differences. Because I'm the one who's always saying, yes, we need to have an election day, and let's go out there, and it should be limited, and it's we need vote by mail and early absentee with no excuses, and let's have voting for a month. Let it get as much turnout as we. Yeah. So
Well, look,
in the end,
they're both in pursuit of turnout, right? Both in pursuit of turnout.
the problem though is, and this has been verified by study after study and all the evidence I can give you. The only thing that increases turnout is voters giving a crap about the election. If they care about the election and who's running, and they want to go out, and that's what drives turnout. If there's issues or people on the ballot that they care about, that they're going to show up. We can tinker with the system as much as we want, but in the end, nothing drives turnout more than a race or candidates that people get excited and passionate about. And if we don't have those, then the turnout's going to suck, no matter how easy we make it or how difficult we make it to vote.
This is where I think CCP could actually boost this a little bit. Maybe help make the player base more aware of what the CSM is, and maybe hype up the election period, so they talk about it more actively and with more content on their pulse videos and maybe on their streams. Because I think we could actually get to a point where if CCP shows that they take it seriously, and even help the CSM actually make their argument, especially with showing or commenting on some of the things that you've actually been doing at the summits, right? Not the stuff that's potentially NDA or risk breaching anything about procedure or anything like that, but talking about what you guys did and what was really productive. Hell, I would love to see you guys' presentations, right? The CSM presentations are not necessarily secret, because there's nothing in that is a secret, right? But the fact that we could see what you showed CCP would be amazing.
I agree with that. I mean, honestly, I'll tell you, of all of the changes that are in this blog, the one that I like the most, that I think will have the most impact on this election, is the requirement to make a post that explains 4 specific questions about you, why you're running, all other kind of stuff. Because that alone requires effort and will weed out a lot of these folks that run and don't ever do anything besides send their stuff into CCP. That, I think, is the biggest change, and that is going to be the best thing, because people are finally going to be able to go and get a concrete understanding of who somebody is, what their background is, why they're running, what they want to work on, or what their reason for running is. That's huge.
But they've done that. There's only 2 or 3 people out of 40 that didn't fill in their story. If I recall, it's a small percentage. I don't think that's.
I always look at Noisy's website when he does his CSM watch, and I would do Oppo research, just figure out who am I running against, and the number of people that no information available or no post or anything. I mean, it was 20 or 30 people.
Why do you do
when
Oppo research?
20 or 30 people out of 7. I want to know who I'm running against. I want to see who do I think has a shot.
You're not debating them.
Who is That's not a question. It's just, look,
all right,
if you're in a race like this, you're being competitive, you have to know who else is out there.
All right.
Because you might have to work with these guys if they get elected. So it's always good to know them.
And you just came up with an idea for a better platform than doing individual interviews, no matter what. Do a debate.
Oppo research.
Debate.
I have a question for Brisk that I think comes out of the INN article that you published. One of the things you talk about, and I've heard said many times by people, is that, in the previous years where we've had a high number of large block incumbents running, it has been very hard to get in as an extra vote, get in as an extra ballot. And there's been a lot of talk about different people splitting the vote. So, if you're coming in as a Nubro focused, or if you're coming in as a wormhole focused, and you end up running against somebody else who also has the same focus as you guys end up splitting the vote, and any possibility of getting into a seat kind of falls through. Do you think that still holds true going forward with the addition of these term limits? And is there an advantage to kind of putting your running behind somebody else and joining their campaign and becoming part of the team that will help them to successfully run once they're elected?
It's going to be interesting to see if that ends up happening. And I could totally see, like before term limits, you know, and in any system without term limits, it's very hard for anyone to give up the seat once they've got it. I mean, incumbency is a huge advantage, and it's also something that people get in there and they like it. They want to keep doing it. I could totally see where you're going with this, where you say, all right, this is your second year. You have one more year. Instead of me running against you now and splitting the votes, we both lose. I'll back you if you in turn back me next year. And that's how we get some folks on that otherwise might not get on. I could totally see that being a thing. That being said, I mean, it's very common to have folks try to cut deals like that, and those deals don't work. It happened to me in real life. You
Or
know, I
even
was
getting together and being like, instead of us running against
All
each
right.
other, let's cooperate and as a group
All
pick
right, you
somebody
guys-
to be our face.
You guys work this out. You two CSM candidates work this out offline. We're going to move over to a different topic.
Thanks, Badro.
Guys, I would love for you to campaign. Not right now. We haven't started yet. But I do think you should have like your TED talk together to work out these things. Okay, enough about CSM. I don't actually like talking about the CSM, although I will admit, because Billy's in here and I should be honest, that they've done some good stuff insofar as balancing the game. If what we think they did actually happened, because we don't know.
I agree with Matt Earl. I don't like talking about it either. I was actually here because I saw the MER came out. I want to hear what you guys had to say about that.
We're about to explore that. You're in the right place, and you can explore it with us, Brisk. Monthly economic reports, everybody. 2020, March. We're not going to read this one, but are there any surprises in here for people who have already looked at it? This is the first time I'm getting a look at it.
Yes.
Let's hear them.
I
For
think
me, go ahead.
go ahead, please.
No. My two things I was surprised the most about. One, Delve is back number on top for ratting income. I was surprised to see that. And two, OWASA dropped so much for mining and ratting. That was surprising to me because I feel like that space is some of the best space, the most protected space. Their umbrella and fraternity's response times are on point. I was very surprised to see it dropped like that. That was my big surprise.
I actually agree with both of those things. I was shocked by OWASA completely falling into a black hole. Another thing that I find is really interesting is that if you look at the production,
Hold on, let me correct you first. It didn't fall into a black hole, did it? What was it last month? 8. So it's down to 7 billion. They lost trillion. So they lost 1 trillion. That's not a hole. I just think Delve came up and got back to business. And remember, they inherited a couple of Chinese groups, and I'm not sure, but they were doing a lot of ratting up north. And now that they're part of Delve and that area, well, actually, Delve's not where they probably rat, is it? Because they're in period basis. But in other words, they got back to business of ratting, and they also got the boost of some groups that came down from Guardians of the Galaxies or the Dead Coalition. So we saw them competing last when we would look at the stats. So it's not totally surprising that Delve is back on top. It's a little surprising to me, but I don't think OWASA fell into a hole. I just think they might have been busy with something else. I'm not sure that's the case.
Lateral, they gained additional territory up north, Tino, Vino, and such. Have we compared how much Tino has risen?
No, well, right. Maybe a lot of that.
I think Rich brings up the point about that. When you're looking at Delve, for example, go to each one. You can't look at Delve in March and compare to February. There's a war in February. People in Delve were deployed in Vino. You might want to look at what Delve looked like in January. When you add the some of the alliances from GOTG, what did those regions look like in January, depending how hard they were getting hit then, and then add that to Delve. And the same thing with the OWASA. You now have the acquisition of that territory and potentially folks spurting out. So are we looking at a single region, or are we looking at all those regions that block controls and see collectively what are those numbers doing?
Yeah, look at Tenal now up there. I don't know if Tenal was up there in the 3 trillion area before, so that might be where some of it went. I'll have to compare. I'm sorry. I'm looking at this for the first time. So I cut you off. Jurius, please go back to what you were saying.
No, that's all right, guys. I was just gonna say that I would have expected to see in both routing and in production charts a much higher climb in the values going into April, like through March and April. I mean, we do see it come up, but not as drastically as I had expected with the bigger increases we've seen in peak concurrent users, and in the fact that there's a lot of people who are at home, isolated, and video games are a great escape from that. And we've definitely seen the numbers come up. It's nowhere near the big drop we saw in Blackout, and the numbers are still climbing, but nowhere near to what I would have expected given the availability of players and people logging in.
I have one for Willy. It looks like player-owned structure markets have gained 7%, which is really nice. We need more, but it's a nice uptick.
Matterall, the total NPC bounties for February, which is the previous one, it's actually gone up. Oaso was 6.7, now it is 7.1.
Yeah.
Delve was 6.1 trillion, and now it is 7.9.
Yeah. Thank you for checking on that history. So
there is also a 1.3 trillion leap for Tino.
Yes. Such a good point, Rich. Thank you for bringing it up. Split efforts between the North and the South for fraternity. So the impression that they have slowed down may be misinformed. It looks like they just are speeding up in two different areas. And Delve has gotten back on its feet, which we knew would happen. I don't know what they were doing in the early January, February. Awasa took the lead, I believe, in February, and now we're seeing March. So all this makes sense if you've been looking at Dotlan as far as NPC bounties. But that's just one measurement of economic activity. There's other stuff too. Let's look at that next. We'll go to total mining. And this is where Delve continues to be strong. Whoa, with nearly 2.8 or over 2.8 trillion in ISK. They dwarf everybody else. What's interesting to me, though, is Domain comes in number 2. Is that just high-sec people just mining to their heart's content? Well, Domain is a big region, so that does kind of talk to collectivizing many, many people into one stat, as opposed to a smaller region like the Forge. Forge is kind of big, too, actually.
I wonder if the Domain that has... is kind of finally the proof that the Wardeck changes have changed, or at least made enough of a difference that a lot of these guys can go mining and make a lot of money.
Oh man, I should hop around, and the station I was undocking with me were like 16 orcas all in a line. I was like, oh boy, what have we done?
There you go.
So it's
these numbers are not corrected for increase in value, so they might be a little bit off. They might not be up as much as we actually expect, because you have to take into account the actual price developments as well. It's the same with the industry.
All right, what else have we got on the MER?
Well, there's a speed increase in money supply that looks a little bit scary. And then, as I mentioned, there's a 7% uptick in market shares to player-owned structures when it comes to actual market activity that you can see on the broker feed.
Let's look at velocity first. Why does that scare you?
Well, because it's moving faster than it usually does, which means that there is it's not being sunk out fast enough. It's actually accelerating compared to normal. The slope of the graph is a steeper incline than your usual growth in money supply, which is usually around, I think it's about 2 to 3%. And this looks like it's speeding up to more like 3 to 4.
Anyone else got thoughts? Wow, we stopped talking about CSM and you guys all go silent.
Well,
Five guys talking about it.
This requires more thinking.
Yeah, we're gonna need a bit more of the nerf bat from Rotati because that incline is not necessarily positive. It's not a good thing. This is where I hope they get around to figuring out what to do with the massive faucet of bounties, because it's still a problem.
I'm
Yeah.
concerned with the massive faucet of bounties because I believe some of the areas have gotten better at protecting their, well, ISK faucets, and it's getting difficult to actually disrupt it and kill, say, people who are doing NPC ratting. There's been certain changes to their fittings, and they've gotten a lot smarter, and might I say, the bots are more numerous now every day.
All right, cool. Money supply has gone up. Let's check out money supply.
You can basically see that the faucet is pretty much picked up to normal from the massive dip, right? So this is something that needs that big nerf bat. It's not that the value shouldn't come into the game, because it definitely should. It just shouldn't come in as flat ISK. It's not healthy.
It should come in as something that needs to be refined through multiple characters.
And can
to
be
slow it
moved
down.
around and can be contested and stolen and destroyed and stuff like that. As soon as it's just being printed directly into your wallet that you can't touch, it's way too bot friendly, way too AFK friendly, and it really doesn't bring risk and assailable wealth onto the field, which is.
Yeah, I agree, and I think if you look at the top 8 sinks and faucets over time chart, like that huge fall off in the months of August through September of last year with blackout, we've seen that come back, and yeah, it's very heavily represented as botting. I don't think that there's any way that CCP would be able to deny that, and I think they've come out a couple of times and said that they're aware that it's an issue, and that a significant number of those people who simply stopped logging in were not the people who play the game.
My issue with the botting is the instant reward, but the fact that this instant reward is, well, 100% secure and goes straight to a wallet. These bots are profitable within their first few hours of existence. Even if they're banned 1 or 2 days later, the bots have already made the profit. They've already done the damage, and it's just going to end up being, well, a hydra where you cut off one head of the snake and 2 come out. Well, one of the things that we've noticed the bots do, and they adapt, is they're now fishing ships with multiple warp core stabilizers. We're dealing with things like Ishtars that we can't stop and kill anymore. There's no way to, well, slow down bot income if they can warp out while pointed and scrammed.
Oh, yeah. If you're looking at the bar there, that top blue bar, it's twice as big as any other income. The blue is income, and the red is taxes or money leaving the game. Blue is money in the game. That NPC straight up ISK cash is twice as big, more than twice as big the next way that money enters the game. The second way is commodity market trading, which kind of surprises me too. And then incursion payouts are different from bounty prices.
That's the blue loot. Commodity is basically blue loot.
So that's one whole income.
If you cut the bounties, the bounties in half and just made half the other half into actual blue loot drops, then you would get the situation where these two switch places and there would actually be skin in the game. Yeah. So that's something that could happen, and it would help a lot with the current ecosystem. Interestingly enough, though, the ISK delta is actually positive, so that might be because of people coming back to the game.
Right, turning fortunes back on that were dormant.
Yep. But it's a lapse, I think, of I think is it 2 weeks for coming in and a month for leaving, something like that.
In other words, it doesn't count for a month. You leave and it doesn't count for a month, the deficit. Yeah.
But it might actually count instantly when you come in, or maybe it's 1 week lapse. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
Because I know they've changed it compared to what it used to be. So, but at least that shows you that it's actual active accounts coming back in the game and showing up.
Yeah.
So that's a positive thing. And it's also what the PCU is showing us. So we are moving into very healthy areas. Of course, the impacts of the changes have not hit yet, but we still have more nerves on the horizon.
Yeah, this still doesn't look healthy to me, though. You have 51 billion coming in from NPC ratting. You have 19 billion being sunk out.
It's potentially healthier because you still. This is again back to the fact that you need to compare this to how many active players are in the game.
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing? And if Hilmer is right when he says that the activity levels are now almost double what they were a year ago, the fact that these numbers look like that is not necessarily that bad because there is more people to share the wealth and to share the activity.
Yeah. Yeah, and also you want more money coming in because it's more opportunity for people to actually do a thing.
More people.
Yeah. All right. Any last thoughts?
Where's all this printed money going? That's what I want to know, because it's all of this is printed and it's all fine and dandy, but where does it all go?
It all ends up in Villy's pocket.
That's only the market shares, and it's not that much.
Yeah, it's a percentage. The question is, where does the money go? Where's all that economic power go? What's it do?
I'm suspecting RMT because there's just way too much money and not a clue where it goes, and there's nothing I can think of off the top of my head that would move such large amounts.
I think if we look at what Noisy's saying about the gray market right now, which is basically RMT, and we're talking illicit RMT, which is players selling in-game items for money, not necessarily RMT.
RMT's never been lower. At this point, you have a situation where you guys just don't understand how much money people spend doing the day-to-day of their EVE online experience.
But
there is all kinds of faucets in this game. I'm not saying that faucets are equal to generation, but
yeah, what Noisy Gamer was saying, at least the last that I saw, was that the gray markets are suffering. There's not a lot of product on for sale, and anyway, whatever CCP is doing to make illicit RMT hurt, it's working. So I don't know.
And it's going to be more effective when the changes that the economy and ecosystem guys are doing starts hitting. This whole news focus on reducing AFK and rewarding active gameplay is definitely going to have a massive impact on the benefit of RMG and the benefit of body.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We're going to look into it a bit more. Maybe we'll talk MER again tomorrow, see if we find anything. Although I think we kind of hit some highlights there. You guys were great about surfacing some stuff. I want to thank you guys for showing up today. We didn't have our talk bubbles up, so people, I hope they recognize your voices, but we had people like Villy, a CSM member, Brisk Rubal. These are very familiar voices to you. We had Cable talking in here, and Caleb, who just talked now. But we also had Jurius Doctor and Rich, who came in late there. I want to thank all you guys. Fonso was here earlier. Those are the voices of the players that you heard earlier today. For now, we're going to go ahead and raid somebody and take off for the day. We'll continue our conversation in Talking in Stations Discord. If you want to join us, I will provide you with that link just now. And we probably missed some topics, right? We can get those next time.
Yeah, we forgot to talk about the awesome weekend of Rooks and Kings.
Rooks and Kings, we'll discuss that tomorrow. We're trying to make these regular again for you guys. We like hanging out, talking about EVE Online. We want you to have something to watch while you're quarantined, and so on and so forth. And a big shout out to our buddy Bjorn B, who gave us a nice thank you for doing these daily talk shows, so he had something to watch while he was recovering from COVID, and we're glad he's recovered. So that's fantastic. And it's really generous of him to share that on his stream, so we appreciate that very much. Okay, everybody, thanks very much. We're going to actually take you to Extra Squishy, okay? Oh, he says he's playing EVE Online, but that doesn't look like EVE Online. Let's go to...
Dump us over to Beltram if you do. He's up. He's playing.
How do you spell that? V...
Baltrom TV.
Voltrom... Vault? V-A-L-T...
B as in
Bravo
Bravo.
Alpha Lima Tango.
Thank you.
Romeo.
Baltrom TV. Excellent. Let's write. Thank you for writing it. I should have just asked for that. All right, everybody. Thanks. That was our first take on CSM. Run if you want to. And the economic report for March. We'll do a bit more of that next time. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the raid. We'll see you tomorrow.